I'd like to start this video by sending a message to the YouTube viewers of the future. The video you're watching now was put together in February 2015. Now, at the time, I don't think that the SJ5000 is quite ready. It's got too many things on it that don't work properly. Now, the firmware on the version I'm reviewing is version 1.4. I'm hoping that some of the issues I've been having can be resolved through firmware updates, but we'll only know for sure in the future. Anyway, on with the review. The first thing you've got to ask yourself is how much you want 60p. I mean, no, not that kind of 60p, this kind of 60p, 60 frames per second, as in 1080p 60, because that's the main selling point of this camera. If you don't need 60p, then get a 30p camera, 1080p 30, perhaps the Sjcam SJ5000, or my particular favourite from their range, the M10. Now, both of those reviews are on my channel and over on my website, techmoan.com. However, on with the review of the SJ5000 Plus, you can see the main feature at the bottom, 1080p 60, shown on the bottom of the box there. But it does do other resolutions, of course. I'll show them in a chart here. Notice I've got 60p and 50p at the top. It depends if you change the camera into PAL mode or NTSC mode. I'll show you that later. But those are all the different frame rates and different resolutions that the camera can do. I'll go through some of those during the course of this video. Now notice at the bottom right here, it says it does 16 megapixel stills. Now I was a little bit suspicious about this, so I looked at the Panasonic data sheet for this particular sensor, and yes, according to Panasonic, it does do 16 megapixels, so I'll believe them this time, unlike the earlier SJ cams that only had a 3 megapixel sensor. Now being an action camera, of course, it will go 30 meters underwater, but you're not going to see anything like that in this video. I'm really just reviewing the product. If you want to see more extreme type footage, have a look on YouTube. I'm sure someone will be doing something ridiculous with this particular camera. Now I'm going to unbox it. This is my version of an unboxing, as you can see. There you go, that's how you unbox something. Let's have a look what's inside here. Now there's loads of stuff, and it'll take me a couple of minutes to go through this. I'll try and be as quick as possible. We've got all these mounts on the left here, so you can attach it to various different things. We've got ones for tripods and ones that go into a tripod, handlebars, all that kind of stuff. That's a USB A to micro B lead for charging the camera and transferring data off it. We've got a cleaning cloth, instruction booklet, two sticky back things that go on the back of these particular mounts, one curved and with a tripod screw hole in it and the other one not, or the other way around, but you know what I mean. You've got those spare stickers for those. I've already got a sticker on the back. You've got a strap there which goes through the holes on the sides of these, so you can perhaps strap them to an arm or something. The camera itself, got a little rubber lens cap for this one that just goes on there. This clip's quite handy. It goes on the back of this particular thing here, this cradle. That is for attaching the camera into. You just put it in there, and it gives you a tripod screw hole at the top and the bottom, so you can perhaps put the camera in your car. But also this clip will go in the back of there, clip into that, and then you could perhaps clip it in a strong pocket and have it pointing outwards. We've got a suction cup thing here, which of course goes into the top of there if you wanted to use it as a dash camera, and then of course you just adjust this, move it around, it's usual kind of thing. Spare door, well, sort of a spare. This one's got holes either side, as you can see here. That lets sound through, and you could also perhaps put a strap through the back of that as well. Of course, it's not waterproof, given the fact it's got holes in it, but the one that's on the back of the case, as normal, is waterproof. Take the little bits of plastic off here, otherwise you'll end up with weird looking video. So there's the waterproof case back on there, as you can see. You've got the standard sort of clip on the bottom here, which you can put into either of those mounts there. I've got a couple of extra things, a car charger with a micro USB on there. These just came as part of a bundle. I'm not going to say you're going to get all these things. Make sure you're aware of what you're going to get. Also, I've got an external battery charger. Again, not part of the standard packing, but it just lets you charge the battery outside the camera and using that USB lead there to plug into a standard USB wall charger. Right, that's it. So let's have a look around the mounts a little bit more here. One thing that we did have a bit of an issue with the previous mounts, they didn't purchase together properly because these shiny surfaces, however much you tighten them up, they'd still keep moving. I used to have to sand them down with sandpaper to give them sort of grip. Well, let's test these ones out, see if they've learned any lessons from the previous SJ cams, as I've been complaining about them in all the videos. And as you can see here, doesn't move. However much I try, it won't twist. So they have learned something after all. We'll just take this screw out of here just to see exactly why this one is holding together, and you can see on one of the pieces here, this is a matte surface. You can just about see that's out of focus, but you can see what's going on. We've got one matte surface here, and then we've got another one inside the thing, and it basically holds together like it should have done from the beginning. Now, if you don't want to use those mounts, you can of course use GoPro ones. You can take this bottom part off here, take that away, and then just put GoPro bits onto the case and extend out from there. You will need to use this particular case because this case fits the SJ5000 Plus. You can't use a GoPro case and you can't put a GoPro in this. It's a different shaped camera. Even though it's pretty similar, the buttons are of course in a different position. We've got 3 down the side, 1 on the top and 1 on the front. Now to get it open you have to slide this little catch to one side and then the door hinges down like that. Now, if you want to get rid of the waterproof door, you just swap it out by twisting it off here, and it just pulls off like that. And then we'll get the one with the holes in the side there, if you want to let sound through. So just clip that into there. If we can just push it down, get a bit of pressure on there, and there you go. So that's that. Take the plastic off that as well, of course. Now, I was a little bit surprised to find that the lens part of this case is actually plastic or perspex or something like that, rather than glass, which was on the previous cases. You can see it's flat as well, which supposedly is good for underwater photography, not that I know. Now let's look around the camera itself. Look at the SJCam logo, SJ5000 Plus there, LEDs on the front, power on, stroke mode button, record start stop button next to an LED. On the side here we've got up down buttons, that's to turn the Wi-Fi on and off. That's a little speaker on the side of it there. On the bottom that's where the battery goes in, and on this side we've got a micro HDMI out, a micro USB, micro SD card slot. You don't get the micro HDMI lead in the case. Now the card I'm using is a 32 gig, it's going to be a class 10 or equivalent. Tiny microphone hole at the bottom there as well on the side. The battery compartment door is a bit of a fiddle to get off. It's not as good as the one on the M10 camera, and you might need to get that battery out of there quite a bit. So make sure you don't lose that little door, because unfortunately, shock horror, the battery life on this one is only 38 minutes, and I timed that using the 1080p 60 mode with the screen off, so that's the maximum I could get out of it in 1080p 60. So you might need one of these external chargers and a few spare batteries, because that really is a very short battery life indeed. Now let's have a look around the camera itself. We'll switch it on. It's one of these ones when you just tap it and it comes on, which is the kind of thing that means it's going to switch on a lot in your pocket, unfortunately. So make sure you've got it set to power down automatically, otherwise that battery will just die in your pocket. We've got 2 LEDs on the left here, we've got the screen in the middle here. Everything looks very familiar to anyone that's used the previous SJ cams. At the top there it tells you how much space is left on the SD card, shows you what mode we're in. Look at that microphone at the top left. If I press the button on the side here, that turns the sound on and off. It's the middle one, as you can see there, little indicator goes on and off. Got to be careful you don't accidentally turn the sound off if you want it on. To start recording, tap the button on the top, little red LED flashes, blue LED on the back, another blue LED on the top, and then the one on the front. We can configure those later on to turn off if we want them to. So you can see the timer counting up at the bottom of the screen there. Notice also there's a little padlock next to it. Now that is if you want to lock a file that's currently recording. If I press the button on the front, see the padlock close? Quite hard to see, but basically it stops that particular file getting erased if you were to loop over the memory card when you're in dashcam mode. Now to switch between modes, press the front. That was video, that's photo. So then you take a still like that. And then if we want to move into the playback modes, we press the mode button again on the front. This gets us into the video playback mode. As you can see, we've got little thumbnails loading in on the screen here. And then if we press the button again, we get into the photo playback mode. Press it again. Finally, we're into the menus. That's what you have to do to get through those menus. Now, I'll show you all those later on in the video. It's going to take me quite a while later on, so you might want to skip that bit when you get to it if you're not that interested. But then we get back to the video again. Now, it is slow getting through these menus. Let's just look. We've got to press it once to get to photo, press it again, video playback. You can't press it again quickly. You've got to wait for those little thumbnails to load in. Then we get into the photo menu. Again, you've got to wait for them. And then we get into the setup menu. That's a bit of a pain for me if I want to just change resolutions. And of course, I'm doing that a lot while I'm testing it. And it's very slow and annoying to try and move between the menus and get into the setups. You might not notice something here, but these little video thumbnails and things, they are animated, which might be the reason for them taking so long to load in. Let's just get back into them again. I just want to zoom in on one. So we'll go up here if we can, waiting for the camera to catch up. There's these delays in these menus, which are pretty annoying, but I'll move this one nearer to the lens now and just see if you can see this little thumbnail moving. There's a chap there at the bottom. You get a little tiny video. Now, okay, so it's a nice feature, but I think that's really slowing down the menus. I don't need that, but to get through the menus, I have to wait for all these little things to load in, which just takes forever. As you can see, scrolling through them as well also takes a long time. So if you want to get to a particular file to play it, as you can see, it's sort of stored a few button presses. So let's try and play that one now. There you go. So this is a clip that I recorded earlier on. You get sound playing through that little speaker. Very quiet speaker. I mean, really quiet. Compared to the previous models, you can almost not hear it when it's doing the beeps and things, especially when you're outside. It's hard to make out what's going on. And same with the photos. Go into there, you can just pick a photo and then you can do sort of slideshow. I mean, there are these nice animations and movements between things that you didn't get in the older versions, but really at what cost? It really slows down the camera. But enough of that. Let's show you some sample clips now. Usual disclaimer applies. Sometimes sample clips can look pretty bad on YouTube when they look good in real life. So if you want to see the true quality, please download some. There's links in the video description. We'll start off with some of my usual shots inside the shopping centre here. You can see that this one originally was shot in 1080p 60, but of course you'll be looking at it in a 30 frame per second mode because that's how I've uploaded the video. If you want to see the 60p, you'll have to download some of those samples. But you see nice and sharp and clear, quite a lot in view. It's a good wide angle lens, 150 odd degrees, I seem to remember. 1080p 30 looks just the same as 1080p 60 as far as resolution and field of view and things go. 720p 60 does have the same field of view. It's a little bit softer, of course, than 1080p, which of course it should be because it's a lower resolution. Now let's just have a look at a still that I shot in the 16 megapixel mode. There you go. You see you got more height on that. You got the same width but more height because it's a 4:3 ratio photo and sensor. That's what a 5 megapixel photo looks like. You won't be able to tell any difference at this resolution, but what I'm going to do, I'm going to zoom right in and we'll see if there is any difference. Right, pay special attention to the word over and in the middle there, and then look at that one, 5 megapixels. They are softer and harder to read, so I do think there is more resolution in the 16 megapixel stills. Now, another thing that's an improvement from this camera from the previous SJ cams is how it copes with bright light, like the sun shining into the lens here. In the previous models it would have gone dark all over the image and it would be hard to make anything out, whereas this camera just has a glare in the lens, so that's a much better way of dealing with things. It's also good in coping with light fluctuations and variations from going from inside to outside here. You can see the camera copes well with this. Now, one thing this camera doesn't have, which perhaps maybe it should have at this price, is image stabilization. Someone complained when I mentioned this on a previous video when I said a camera didn't have image stabilization, but remember, I bought a Sony action camera a couple of years ago that costs less than this, that does have really good stabilization. So I'm kind of expecting it now in these higher priced cameras, and that's for me to expect. If you don't want it, don't get it, but I think it'd be nice to have it on this camera. Again, pointing it into the light here to see what the camera can see when it's looking right into the sun, and then I'll spin it around and you can see that this is a nicer looking scene, of course, with a nice bright light on it. And that's one of the things with this camera. It does like nice bright sunny environments, such as this one here. I've recently renovated this part of Manchester. It does look quite nice, so I've done a few shots around here. That's the central library, a circular building, looks pretty good. Of course, we've got this bulgy fisheye effect with this camera, and that's because it's got that wide angle lens, 150 odd degrees as I mentioned. I think it was 155, 156, I can't quite remember, I haven't got the manual in front of me, but as you can see, big wide angle on there, which means you get a lot in shot, but you do get these bending posts, things curving in towards the centre. There's no way to get around that having a little wide angle lens, but you can of course do things in editing packages afterwards to straighten things out a little bit. Let's have a look how the camera copes indoors. So we're inside the Printworks here. Looks pretty good. I think the frame rate's dropped down quite a bit to make it look this bright, but it's doing a pretty decent job. on the screen on the back of the camera, things always look bright even when they're dark, so it's hard to make out how the camera's coping until you actually go home and have a look at the original video files. This is what 1080p 60 looks like in the same environment. The thing with 1080p 60 does need more light, so you'll probably notice a little bit more grain in this shot. So generally I've shot the interior stuff at 1080p 30, and as long as there's some decent ambient light around, you will get a pretty decent quality image. Now, one of the features of this camera are the slow motion mode, so let me show you a couple of those. First off, I'm going to show you 720p 120, but I've played it back at 25% speed. Now, I wonder, this woman going up the escalator looks at a watch. This is taking a little bit longer than she expected. But that's quite a nice effect, 720p 120, it looks alright, it's quite useful, I suppose. One thing that the camera's supposed to do though is a 240 frames per second mode at 480p, and this is it. Now this doesn't look good, does it? It looks like something's gone wrong, and it's not my particular camera. I've looked on forums and people have got the same issue. The 480p 240 frames per second mode is just completely rubbish, and it looks awful, and you shouldn't use it. Unless you want really terrible looking video. And this is the kind of thing that I'm not sure could be fixed with a firmware update. Now, I did find that the camera tends to shoot things looking rather dull and dark. So luckily I was carrying around my HTC Re camera at the same time. Now that's a camera that tends to make things look a little bit brighter, so I thought I'll do some side-by-side comparison shots. So this is a shot taken with the SJ5000 Plus. As you can see, it looks a pretty dull day. I mean, it's winter, but it does look really dark. It wasn't. This is what it looks like with the HTC Re. As you can see here, it's quite a bit brighter. Now, one thing I do notice, the SJ5000 Plus does seem sharper than the Re. Again, this is the SJ5000. You'll notice when it's the Re because it mentions it on the screen. There you go. So the Re looks brighter, but the SJ5000 definitely looks sharper. And this is the last comparison shot, again showing the sort of bulgy fisheye barrel distortion you get on this building as I move up and down with the SJ5000 Plus. How to say that all the time, 5000 Plus, but anyway, and that's what the Re looks like, nice and bright. So one thing I did notice after doing all this, I turned the brightness up a little bit on the SJ5000 Plus. I did plus 0.7 on the exposure settings, trying to brighten things up a little bit. Now on a nice sunny scene like this, things do look pretty good, but you really have to hunt out scenes like this in winter, because quite often, more often than not, things are a little bit dull. And when things are a bit dull, whatever I've done with the exposure, this camera just makes them look really dull. Now, of course, if you up the exposure too much, you're going to bleach everything out. So it's a bit of a balancing act, and as I said before, that screen doesn't give you much of a clue as to what the end result is going to look like until you go home and test it out. Now, I did have a bit of an issue with sound. The next couple of clips will show you some bad sound, and then there'll be a decent one after that. And that's because of the volume settings that I had in the camera. So let's have a look.
You can fall for change to go. You can fall for pretty strangers and the promises they own. You promised me everything. You promised me thick and thin, yeah. Now you just say, oh, Romeo, yeah. You know you used to have a scene with them, Juliet.
Well, sorry about that, but the sound that chap was making was actually pretty decent. It's just the microphone on the camera was distorting it. If you reduce the mic level on the camera down to its minimum, which is 50%, it will actually record pretty decent sound. So let's have a listen.
I don't have money on my mind, no money on my mind. I'll do it for the love. I don't have money on my mind, no money on my mind. I'll do it for the love. Cause when the sun don't set, don't you fret. No, I have no money on my mind, no money on my mind, no money on my mind. Still I have no money on my mind, just love. I don't have money on my mind, no money on my mind. I'll do it for the.
Now overall it doesn't look that bad so far, but while I'm showing you this driving footage, I just want to mention the reasons why I don't think this particular camera is quite ready to go on sale yet. I did mention it at the beginning that I don't think it's finished, and that's because it crashes all the time or freezes up. It freezes up every time I charge it. It gets stuck in loops. When you switch it on, it'll reboot 5 or 6 times in a row. You'll change mode and it'll just freeze and you have to pull the battery. I've lost count of how many times I've pulled the battery on this camera. It's the least reliable camera that I've ever reviewed. There's also issues with regards to the heat. It does seem to get a little bit too hot at times. And also the battery indicator goes from being full to being empty without anything in between. And it just seems to die on you, and you wonder what happened to the battery life because you only charged it a few minutes earlier. Anyway, let's go over to me in the car now because I've got a few more things to go on about. Now, whilst I can't imagine anyone buying the SJ5000 Plus just to use it as a dash cam, it will function perfectly well as one, just like all the other SJ cams. It's got the ability to automatically start and stop when it receives power or when it's switched off, loop over the oldest footage on the memory card, so it just continuously re-records, storing the last couple of hours or so worth of footage without any need to change the card or delete anything. Now in a moment we're going to go into a completely dark area with no street lights, so we'll see how that looks. But just before I do that, one more tip. I'd started off doing some daytime driving footage and I put the car into car Dvr mode, but I didn't attach a power lead to it because it had plenty of battery life. I got home and I noticed that it had stopped recording after 3 minutes, and the reason is because it saw that it was in car Dvr mode. It wasn't receiving any power, so I thought I might as well shut off. So just a word of warning there, if you do plan on shooting with this camera on batteries, don't put it in the car DVR mode. I can imagine there'll be quite a few people get a little bit confused by that and wonder why they can't shoot footage more than a couple of minutes without the camera turning off. Okay, so we've reached the stretch of road where the street lights run out, so just after I go around this corner we're going to end up without any street lights. We'll just have the car headlights to light the way. Here we go now. Now as you can see, I haven't got the best car headlights in the world on this smart roadster. They're never particularly good lights, but I won't put them into full beam because I can see this chap coming the other way. Right, so he's got out of the way. Let's put the full beam on. As you can see, they're not particularly brilliant lights, but hopefully it gives you an idea how the camera's coping. Now one thing about this camera, it does have those LEDs on it that flash, and of course I've switched off the front LED because it will reflect back off the inside of the windscreen. However, I have left the LED on at the top that's flashing blue, and I can see that lighting up the headliner in the car, so possibly that might be coming through on the video. I'll find out when I get back. Now I'll show you some photos on the screen. One thing to bear in mind, if you want to take a still, you have to go into the photo menu to take a full resolution one and then go through all those other menus one after the other again to get back to the video mode, which is a bit irritating. It takes much too long, as we saw earlier on. I've got these photos or stills available to download if you want to see the true full resolution version. This is also a burst mode photo I'm going to show you now, where it's supposed to be able to take 20 photos in 1 second. It can't. I'll show you more about that later on. Now, if you've got your own micro HDMI lead, you can plug that into your television. You still get the tiny little thumbnails on the back of the camera screen, but then you can view the full-size images or videos on your television screen. And using that HDMI lead, you can record and see the things that the camera's recording over HDMI at the same time. The real reason I'm plugging the lead into the camera, though, is to show you through these menus. It's a little bit hard showing you on the camera screen itself. It's going to take me about 5 minutes to go through these, so you might want to skip forward if you're not interested. Starting off, resolutions. You can see the different ones there. These are the ones that you get when you're in the NTSC mode in the camera. You can switch between NTSC and PAL. These options change in PAL. Notice there's the 842 848 by 480 at 240p, which doesn't work. However, 848 by 480 does work at 120p, but then again, you might as well just use a 720p mode if you're doing that. These are the different photo resolution options that you get inside the camera, all the way up to 16 megapixels. And if we move into the quality there, you can see we go between super fine, fine and normal. All my videos are in super fine. Self-timer is the kind of thing you get on a normal camera. It counts down, then takes one photo, like a self-timer. Burst rate is where you select the burst rate modes. I just showed you that a second ago. Apparently, looking at this, 3 per second, 5 per second, 10 per second, and 20 frames per second, it doesn't do 20 photos in a second. I timed it in a couple of different resolutions, 5 megapixel and 16 megapixel, and look at the time at the top of the screen there. 4:67 is when I press start. It's pointing at a stopwatch. Go all the way along. Those are the 20 pictures it took. At the bottom right there, 7 seconds. So it takes just over 2 seconds to take those photos it says it's going to take in 1 second. But it does take 20 stills in 2 and a bit seconds, which isn't bad, I suppose. It definitely doesn't do it in a second, though. Maybe it would if I'd set it in a really low resolution mode, perhaps 1080p. Maybe I should have tried that. Now, auto shoot. This takes a photo every 3, 5, 10, 30 or 60 seconds and just keeps taking them. You could use those photos for time-lapse, but 3 seconds is a bit of a big gap to use for time-lapse photos. There is a proper time-lapse mode, which makes time-lapse video, not stills. And in this mode, you select it 1, 2, 5, 10, 30 or 60 seconds, and every one of those it takes a new frame of video, and you have to be in the video mode, and you press record and it makes a time-lapse video. And this is what I took, with the video taking a new frame every 2 seconds, which to be honest is a little bit too fast. 1 second is about the maximum I would have wanted to do something like this with. Now, dual streams, if you switch that on, it takes 2 videos at the same time. It takes your normal video as well as a little sort of thumbnail video at a lower resolution. I suppose you'd stream those over that Wi-Fi mode if you wanted to. As you can see here, they're 432 by 240 in resolution, so not something that I really need, and I switch those off. Duration is the length of clip that you'll get if you're recording it using it as a card DVR, and same with loop recording. If you've got that switched on, when the card's full, it'll loop over the oldest clip and delete it and replace it with a new one. Motion detection, I believe that one is at the top. I'm not using that. Digital zoom, leave that switched off. LEDs, you've got a choice here, 1, 2 and 3. 3 has all 3 LEDs on, 2 has the front and the top, and 1 LED just has the one on the top on, and of course you can switch them all off. Better off turning the front one off, I think, because it alerts people too much that you're recording and also reflects off windscreens and things. Wi-Fi LED on-screen display. If you were using this with a remote control aircraft, you could turn the on-screen display clutter off, all that text that's around the edges there, and then you wouldn't have to look at that every time you were recording or flying your plane. There's too much information on screen there really that gets in the way. Apparently there's also an AV out lead you can get for this camera, so it sends the video over an AV lead rather than HDMI. That's what it looks like with the on-screen display off, by the way. Right, so car DVR mode, if you were using it as a dash cam, turn that on. Down at the bottom here you can see NTSC and PAL. That's where you change the resolutions. It resets the whole camera and puts it into PAL mode, at which point your resolutions turn into these options here, which I mentioned right at the beginning of the video, the different options that you can get. You can see they've all changed into multiples of 25. Down at the bottom, rotate is flip. If you want to flip the video upside down. Mic volume, knock that down to 50%, which is the lowest, and then the sound quality is all right. Anything more than that, it distorts, or at least it did on my camera. I can only really talk about the camera I bought. Date stamp, you can switch that off if you want, or you can have the date, the time, or the date and time shown on your video. But remember, you can switch it off if you want. Languages, let me just page down these quickly. If you see any favourites here, just shout. There we go. That's the time and date. My camera at one point lost the time and date. I had to reset it. That was after one of those freeze-ups. There's the date format, which way around you want it, how long you want before the screen switches itself off automatically. Use that to preserve battery life and stop it annoying you if you're using it in the car in the dark. Also auto shutdown. Make sure you got that set to a low number like 3 minutes, because this camera will automatically switch on in your pocket if you just touch it slightly on that power on button. But regardless, it'll eat the battery up anyway. Frequency for your own country, light meter if you want it in the centre, multi or spot. I did all my videos with centre switched on. ISO, didn't mess with this, left it on auto. And then over the page we've got the white balance which again I left on auto for all the videos that you're looking at. Exposure value, that's the one I changed to +7 just to brighten things up a bit. It will go all the way up to +2 or -2, which I can't imagine anyone really wanting minus numbers on this particular camera. Buzzer is the beeper. Do you want the beep on or off? It's very quiet, very hard to hear. Wi-Fi, if you want to switch it on in there. Format the card in the camera, and again that's the firmware version of the camera that I'm testing. Right, let's take a look at the Wi-Fi functionality now. Because this camera uses a different kind of chipset to the earlier SJ cams, it uses a different piece of software to access the Wi-Fi functionality. It's called Link in Eyes, and it's available on the iOS App Store as a free app, of course. I've installed it on my iPhone, and I'm going to turn on the Wi-Fi on the camera, holding the button down on the side there until you get this little flashing light. The camera also reboots, and if you look at the back top left next to the picture of the camera, you can see a little Wi-Fi icons appeared as well. So we're just waiting for the phone to pick up on the Wi-Fi hotspot that's being generated by the camera. I've sped this up a bit because it took about 20 odd seconds, but there it is, it's appeared. So press on that and it asks me for a password. The password is 12345678. So let's join that up now. And now we're connected to the camera. So let's jump into that application that's on the iPhone. So we'll just go back to the home menu here. I think I said that a bit earlier, didn't I? Look, I'm sort of talking before it's happening. But anyway, you get the idea. Hooray, we're in. So let's just have a look, see if it's connected up. Ah, right, good. As you can see there, live action, sort of live. You always get this lag with Wi-Fi, but there you go. That's me live on air. Right, so let's try some settings now. At the top right there where it says 60p on the screen, I'd imagine that's where you change the resolution. So let's press that and get into the options, and there's nothing there. Right, okay, so we'll go back out of that again and we'll try some other stuff. Let's try recording with it. Press the red button. There you go, it's recording. However, look, I've lost the live signal now. It's recording, but it doesn't seem to want to stream and record at the same time. So I thought it would do that, but never mind. Anyway, it's still recording, so that's good. So we'll just stop it now. Press the red button again to stop it recording. See if it comes back again live. That'll be interesting. And there we go. Yeah, we are back on again. So pressing the cog at the bottom left, go into the settings, and there's nothing there either. So there's some issues with this app, definitely. Of course, you can always update apps. It's obviously not quite right. Let's go into trying to play something back. A bit of a delay here while it loads these in. But there you go. We've got a little thumbnail next to everything. It tells us when we recorded it. But look, when we try and scroll down, it has to load it in again when you scroll, which gets pretty old, doesn't it? Because you can only see, how many things can you see on screen now? Was it like 5 or 6 or something? It wasn't too many. So if you really want to go through hundreds and hundreds of things, this could take quite a while. Let's try and play one. Little clip here. This should be all right. Well, that's not so good, is it? Pretty poor. I mean, I don't know how long that clip is. It's only a few seconds. Maybe that's when you have to use the dual recording to play back files. I'm not entirely sure, but we'll go back out to that. Oh, it's crashed. Well done, Link in Eyes. The best application of the year, I think. Could do with some work. Okay, let's whiz through some stats. The weight is 77.7 grams or 2.7 ounces. That's without the case on. If we put the case on the camera, 171 grams or 6 ounces. Video stats, it uses MP4, Ambarella AVC codec. Those are the bit rates at the bottom, all variable bit rates. If you get 24 minutes of video at 1080p 60, it will take up 4 gigs, and that gives you an idea as to how much you could fit on your memory card. Always get a class 10 one or above, of course. I've got a page of FASQs here, frequently asked silly questions. If you're going to ask a silly question, press pause, have a read, your answer might be on that screen now. As far as the pros and cons of this camera go, well, on the positive side, it does do 1080p 60 and it does do 720p 120. There are all those mounts inside the box, and I sometimes forget about these cameras, the fact that they do have a colour LCD screen on the back, which is something that's often an optional extra with some of the more famous brand name action cameras. However, on the negative side, there's a lot going on here. The frequent crashes, lockups and reboots basically mean that I can't use this camera at the moment. The battery life is insufficient. 38 minutes I got out of this. That's really not good enough. Sorry. It's not really that cheap anymore, I don't think. There are alternatives available at similar prices that might produce better results. The iOS app just doesn't work. The camera does get pretty hot. I mean, pretty hot, and I'm kind of worried about it. It just seemed a little bit too hot. The 240p mode, the 480p, 240p mode, it's a failure. It doesn't work. It's a disaster. And those slow menus, getting through the menus takes forever. And for someone like me that has to move through the menus pretty quickly to move between photo, video, change the different resolutions, it was not a pleasant camera to use. In addition, the speaker is very quiet, which is weird because the other SJ cams don't suffer from this problem. I don't know what they've done with that. And then, of course, we've got the issue of the microphone peaking out if you set the volume a little bit too high. But remember, I'm dealing with version 1.4. I'm crossing my fingers that a lot of these things are going to get fixed in the future. But I really don't think that they're going to be able to fix all the issues that I had with this camera. Now, if you want to download video samples or photos, there's links in the video description, and I've got links if you want to buy one of these up there as well, but I can't imagine you doing that right at the moment, but I'll get some sort of affiliated stuff. By the way, I've also got some links to alternatives that you might find a little bit more interesting. Anyway, that's it for the moment. As always, thanks for watching.